So this is a preview I made. Just messed around with the editor of on my computer. I've been trying to learn how to use it. So the channels of the two gentlemen in this clip are in the description, and I highly recommend subscribing and being familiar with their content. So do like and subscribe their channels and enjoy the show.
Go back and watch this video a couple times because you're saying some things. I'm like, man, I start thinking about it, and then you make another good point. I'm like, wow, all right, you're getting my attention. You know, hearing you say these things, and I've heard you say this before, and what's really caught my attention is it just seems kind of intuitive that in all of God's creation, whether it be some pocket of the cosmos here that you, as you say, or somewhere in some other realm or dimension that God could create, it seems that why would God keep any evil around? Why would God keep any pocket of his creation around that would eternally resist him and hate him and hate others? It just, you know, when you talk about that, that gets my attention.
You know, when Paul talks about God being all in all in the eschaton, when Christ hands over the kingdom to his Father, the picture doesn't seem to be one in which there's some pocket of the cosmos in which sin and rebellion are continuing to go on forever.
Right.
But if I'm right, and if this imagery symbolizes the annihilation of all of God's enemies, then the eschaton, all of God's creation, will be pure and sinless, which strikes me as far more consistent with the biblical meta-narrative. Right. And I'll add that it seems to be more consistent with the holiness of God. You know, very often people who hold my view are criticized as thinking that sin isn't all that big of a deal. But which God seems to take sin even more seriously? The God who guarantees that sin goes on forever by making immortal the beings who commit it, or the God who is so furious with sin that he finally obliterates it and everybody who persists in it? It seems to me that the latter one is the God who takes sin more seriously. And that's the God. Now, what matters isn't what's, you know, subjectively worse than the other, but what might matter is which is objectively worse. You see, classically, being itself has been seen as a good, and life all the more so.
Yeah.
And so, and very often we hear defenders of eternal torment say something like, in hell, God will deprive the wicked of all good things. But life is a good thing, and existence is a good thing. And those two things God gives to the wicked for all eternity in the doctrine of eternal torment. But in my view, God withholds even those goods from the wicked. So now, as for the cross, I don't see any reason for thinking that it diminishes, my view diminishes the significance of the cross, in part because of what I've just said about the severity of sin, the seriousness of sin. But I'll add that if we believe in the doctrine of substitutionary atonement, then which view magnifies the substitutionary death of Jesus? The view that says that Jesus died in the place of people who will never die in hell, or would have never died in hell? Or the view that says Jesus died and those who refuse to accept that gift will themselves die in hell, right? In other words, one of these two views treats the punishment Jesus bore on the cross as genuinely the substitute for what would have awaited those for whom he died, and for those who refuse to self-appropriate his gift, especially if you're not a Calvinist like me. One view says what he suffered on the cross is as far the opposite of what they think awaits the wicked in hell as you could possibly get. He died. The wicked will live forever in torment, in their view. In my view, though, the very penalty he suffered, death, was the punishment we would have suffered forever. And it's precisely because he bore it in our place that we will instead rise and live forever. That doesn't seem to me to diminish the significance of the cross. That seems to magnify it.
Okay. Interesting. Man, you know, you're saying some of this stuff, and I'm like, man, I'm going to have to go back and watch this video a couple times because you're saying some things. I'm like, man, I start thinking about it, and then you make another good point. And I'm like, wow. All right, you're getting my attention. You've had my attention for a long time, but this is a fascinating conversation.
Hopefully you heard that. Did you hear it?